Can an ordinary modern person survive in an open field at an extreme temperature of -40 degrees when a squall wind literally knocks you off your feet? This is a question that makes even trained people shudder, because in such conditions, the environment becomes a deadly enemy. Native Americans understood that heat is a limited resource that must be conserved as carefully as water or food supplies. They developed a whole system of psychological training that allowed them to remain calm even when death was breathing down their necks. This endurance allowed them to make rational decisions at times when others succumbed to the instinctive desire to flee, which invariably led to disaster. It was this combination of knowledge and strength of spirit that made them the true masters of these harsh lands. Watch our video to the very end, and you will learn how an ordinary snowdrift could become much warmer and safer for a person than a solid house. We will take a detailed look at the secrets of ancient technologies for building temporary shelters that saved lives on the darkest nights. What if I told you that everything you believed about survival is not true? The main killer in a snowstorm is not low temperatures, but human panic. European pioneers, caught off guard by a blizzard, often made the fatal mistake of trying to run through a wall of snow. They spent their last ounce of strength fighting the wind, quickly exhausted themselves, and froze to death on the spot. The Plains Indians knew very well that trying to outrun the storm or find shelter in zero visibility was doomed to failure. When the storm began, the wisest decision was to stop right where the elements caught you. The hunter instantly suppressed his animal instinct to flee and switched to a mode of absolute calm. Cold calculation was the first and most important layer of protection against the deadly frost. The first task was to restore even breathing in order to lower the heart rate. Fear causes the heart to beat faster, rushing hot blood to the extremities where it instantly cools. Once calm, a person retained precious heat inside the body, protecting vital organs. This required tremendous mental discipline and years of training. An experienced survivor began to assess the situation, relying not on sight, but on touch and hearing. In the white fog, the eyes were useless, so the direction of the wind was determined by the skin of the face. It was necessary to find any change in the terrain that could provide minimal protection by touch. Even a tiny depression or the bed of a dry stream could become a life-saving shelter. The plains, which appear perfectly flat on maps, are actually full of hidden ravines and folds in the terrain. The Indians knew how to read the land with their feet, feeling the differences in height and soil density under the snow. Once they found a depression, they did not waste time building a complex shelter or wigwam. The main goal was to get below the wind level so that the icy wind would pass over their heads. In the nature of the Great Plains, every extra movement in the cold was too costly. Hasty movements could damage clothing or equipment, which was tantamount to a death sentence. A person would freeze, becoming a motionless part of the landscape around which the storm would flow. Deep concentration allowed them to save calories by not wasting them on useless muscle tension. A special tactic was used if a group of hunters or an entire squad was caught in a blizzard. They acted as a single coordinated organism, understanding each other without words or voice commands. It was pointless to shout in the deafening roar of the wind, so they communicated with touches or signs. Losing a comrade in such a situation meant condemning him to certain death alone. A lone traveler relied solely on his intuition and a deep spiritual connection with the surrounding world. Many historical chronicles describe the amazement of Europeans who found Native Americans completely unharmed after a storm. They sat motionless under the snow as if immersed in deep meditation. To Westerners, this seemed like incomprehensible magic or supernatural ability. In reality, it was a victory of reason over chaos and a refusal to fight the inevitable. The ability to wait was perhaps the most important skill in the harsh arsenal of indigenous peoples. A storm could last several hours or even days, and all this time it was necessary to remain sane. Patience allowed them not to do anything foolish out of despair and to wait for the storm to end. This philosophy of survival was based on respect for the power of nature, not fear of it. People did not feel like victims. They simply temporarily changed their rhythm of life to suit the weather. This psychological attitude made warriors virtually invulnerable to panic and terror. We would be very interested to hear your point of view. What do you think about such endurance? Could you remain calm in an icy hell? Write about it in the comments. Are you ready to learn the truth about what actually kept you warm best? Paradoxically, snow itself became man's main ally in the fight against the deadly cold. For the unprepared city dweller, a snowdrift is associated exclusively with frostbite and inevitable death. But indigenous peoples knew the properties of natural materials long before the advent of physics textbooks. Freshly fallen snow consists of almost 90% air trapped between ice crystals. This makes it an excellent natural insulator, available in unlimited quantities. If this resource is used correctly, it is possible to create a protective cocoon around oneself with a temperature of around 0. The warrior did not try to shake himself off, but instead allowed the snow to cover him with a thick layer. The hunter found a low spot or dug a small depression in the dense snow cover. To do this, they used flat bison shoulder blades, wooden bowls, or simply their gloved hands. It was not like building a spacious igloo, which required time and skill. It was more like a cramped burrow or trench exactly the size of the body. The snow walls reliably blocked the piercing wind, which blew the warmth out of clothing in seconds. Inside such an improvised shelter, its own microclimate quickly developed. The smaller the interior space, the faster it warmed up with the heat of human breath and bodies. The main thing was not to leave any unnecessary empty spaces that would take a long time to warm up. It was critically important to ensure that the snow did not melt from direct contact with clothing. When water froze, it turned into an icy crust that killed the thermal insulation instantly. Therefore, they always tried to leave a small air gap between the body and the snow wall. This balance between closeness and distance was the key to comfort. Sometimes, if the snowfall was heavy, a person would literally bury themselves in it up to their head. Only a tiny hole remained on the surface for fresh air to enter. This required tremendous psychological resilience, as it felt like being buried alive. But it was the thick layer of snow above their head that saved their brain from hypothermia. In such snow capsules, the temperature never dropped to critical levels incompatible with life. It worked on the principle of a modern sleeping bag, only made of frozen water. Outside, a hurricane could rage, breaking branches, but under the snowdrift, there was complete silence. This silence helped to calm down and conserve energy for the morning. The peoples of the subarctic and northern plains, such as the Kori and the Blackfoot, perfected this art. They could wait out multi-day blizzards in the snow without getting a single frostbite. They knew that snow was not a dead, cold mass, but a porous material. Even a thin layer of snow on their shoulders acted as an additional windproof cape. The only danger was wet snow, which could stick to and soak their clothes. But in the severe frosts typical of the plains, the snow was usually dry and crumbly. It did not stick to fur and was easily shaken off when shelter was no longer needed. This knowledge transformed a seemingly hostile environment into a safe haven. Did you know that the temperature under the snow can be 20 degrees higher than on the surface? It's simple physics that has saved the lives of thousands of people over the centuries. In the next chapter, you'll learn how the ground beneath your feet could become treacherous. What I am about to show you is banned in 12 countries as a dangerous practice. But for Native Americans, it was the norm. The greatest and most hidden threat to a person lying down was not the frosty air, but the ground. Frozen soil has enormous heat capacity and can drain life from the body very quickly. Contact with the ground without good insulation meant certain death from hypothermia of the internal organs. Therefore, before lying down in a snow shelter, a warrior had to create a reliable insulating layer. Absolutely everything that could be found in the bare steppe was used. The best material was considered to be branches of coniferous trees or shrubs, which created an air cushion. If these were not available, wormwood stems or tough steppe grass were used. They pulled up bunches of dry grass from under the snow and laid them in a thick layer. They wove it into a kind of thick mat to create a distance between the body and the icy ground. Even a horse's saddle or breastplate served as an excellent barrier to protect the kidneys. Indigenous peoples used every available item to create this barrier. Warriors often used their thick bison leather shields not only for protection against arrows. Such a shield placed on the ground was waterproof and retained heat well. Each piece of equipment had a double or even triple purpose on a campaign. The ability to see combat equipment as survival tools was instilled from childhood. Particular attention was always paid to protecting the lower back and lungs. People would lie down in such a way as to minimize the area of contact between their bodies and the surface. The ideal position was on one side, with legs tucked up to the stomach. This allowed only the hip and shoulder, protected by a mat, to rest on the ground. It was strictly forbidden to lie directly on stone or bare ice, even if the surface appeared to be flat. Stone drew heat away at a catastrophic rate, leaving no chance to warm up. The Indians could feel the cold breath of the earth with their backs and knew when the layer of insulation was thinning. The slightest discomfort was a signal to immediately improve the bedding. Sometimes snow itself was used as insulation if it was compacted. However, this was a risky method that required clothing that was completely impervious to moisture. It was much more reliable and safer to use animal skins, which were always available. The fur created an additional air layer that retained body heat. Rich warriors had luxurious bison capes, which they laid first side up for maximum comfort. The poor used pieces of old leather or mats woven from reeds, which they carried on their backs. But the principle remained the same for everyone. Not a single centimeter of the body should touch the ground. It was a rule written in the blood of many generations. This struggle to stay warm from below was an invisible but crucial battle every night. If the insulation was crushed or wet from body heat, the person was forced to get up. They had to rearrange their bed in the middle of the night, in the dark and cold, in order to survive. Laziness or carelessness in this matter was punished with severe pneumonia. It was attention to such details and an understanding of heat exchange that allowed them to survive where others froze. It was not just an overnight stay, but an engineering task of thermal insulation. Like this if you are surprised by the resourcefulness and practicality of ancient peoples. Guess what happened next to those who underestimated the importance of proper clothing? The clothing of the indigenous peoples of the plains was not just a set of skins, but a complex engineering system. The main principle was to create a multi-layered air gap around the entire body. The air trapped between the hairs of the fur and the layers of leather was the best insulation in the world. In severe frosts, bison fur capes were worn with the fur inside, directly against the body. This created a warm air chamber directly against the skin and better retained precious heat. The smooth leather side on the outside served as a powerful wind barrier. It was impervious to icy gusts and protected the fur from getting wet with snow. The suit was never supposed to be tight or restrict movement, disrupting blood circulation. Loose-fitting shirts and leggings allowed blood to circulate freely, warming the fingers and toes. If the clothing was too tight, the risk of frostbite increased significantly. The loose fit also allowed for additional layers to be worn if necessary. Belts and leather ties were used as tools to regulate the temperature inside the suit. If it became unbearably cold, the belt was tightened to trap warm air inside. If it was necessary to cool down a little while moving, the ties were loosened to provide ventilation. It was a kind of manual climate control. Special attention was paid to the feet, which were the first to get cold in deep snow. Moccasins were made of soft smoked leather and were quite spacious inside. The shoes were stuffed with dry grass, moss, or bison wool, creating an insulating insole. This layer was removable and available anywhere in the steppe. The grass filling not only kept the feet warm, but also absorbed excess moisture from them. In the evening, the wet grass was thrown away and replaced with a fresh, dry portion. It was an ingeniously simple way to keep your feet warm without a spare pair of shoes. Dry feet were essential for a hunter's mobility and survival. Mittens were usually sewn with one common compartment for all fingers at once. With their fingers together, they warmed each other much more effectively than in gloves. Mittens were often attached to a long string around the neck so as not to lose them. Losing a mitten in a blizzard could cost a person their hands and ultimately their life. Collars and hoods were designed to cover the face from the side wind. A kind of tunnel was created in front of the face, where the air had time to warm up a little before being inhaled. The edge of the wolverine or wolf fur was not covered with frost from breathing. Ice on the collar could scratch the face and cause severe frostbite on the cheeks. The entire clothing system was modular and easy to repair in the field. A moccasin torn on a branch could be sewn up with sinew thread in a couple of minutes. Independence from external supplies and the durability of materials were the foundation of survival. Indians always carried a repair kit with them in a special pouch. What modern material do you think can compare to bison fur in terms of warmth? The secrets of tanning and sewing were passed down from generation to generation by skilled craftswomen. In the next chapter, you will learn why food was more important than fire. To keep a house warm, you need to constantly add dry wood to the stove. In this sense, the human body is no different from an ordinary stove. In extreme cold, the body burns a tremendous amount of calories just to keep warm. The Indians understood this direct relationship perfectly and treated food as fuel. Before the onset of a storm or during short lulls, it was essential to eat. Moreover, the food had to be specific, rich, and heavy. The basis of the winter diet was pemmican, a concentrated mixture of dried meat and fat. Fat was a key element, providing long-lasting and slow energy. A small piece of pemmican replaced huge portions of ordinary plant-based food in terms of calorie content. This product did not freeze to a rock-hard state even in the most severe frost. It could be chewed on the go or while lying in a cramped shelter. It did not require building a fire or spending time on cooking. Digesting heavy, fatty food in itself raised the body temperature from within. This process is called thermogenesis and works like an internal heating pad. Warriors knew that a sharp feeling of hunger was the first sign of danger. It meant that the body was beginning to cool down and lose its strength to resist. They ate often, but in very small portions, to keep their metabolism going. Not eating on a cold night reduced the chances of waking up in the morning several times over. Food supplies were always carried in pouches on the belt, in the warmth of the body. Losing a supply of pemmican was worse than losing a weapon. The second most important problem was water, although it was not easy to obtain in winter. Eating snow with your mouth was strictly forbidden. It was a gross mistake. Melting snow in your mouth took away precious body heat and cooled your throat. Snow had to be melted in a flask under your clothes or in your palms. Dehydration in the cold crept up unnoticed, but had fatal consequences for the body. The blood became thick and viscous, which impaired its circulation through the vessels. Thick blood did not reach the tips of the fingers and toes well, causing frostbite. Therefore, the Indians forced themselves to drink, even if they did not feel thirsty. Sometimes they used special herbal mixtures or chewed certain bitter roots. This stimulated profuse salivation and helped to deceive the false feeling of thirst. The ability to listen to the needs of their bodies was part of their culture of upbringing. Water and fat were the two pillars on which life depended in winter. Even when there was no food at all, the Indians used a technique of muscle tension. They alternately tensed and relaxed large muscle groups without moving. This allowed them to generate heat by burning their own internal fat reserves. It was an emergency way to keep warm when external resources were exhausted. Survival was a strict mathematical calculation of the balance between energy gained and energy expended. An error in this equation inevitably led to death. Every gram of fat and every sip of water was worth its weight in gold. The hidden truth that everyone keeps quiet about is that sleep can kill. A good deep sleep in a snow shelter is a direct path to a quiet death. Deep sleep slows down metabolism and heart rate and critically lowers body temperature. A person who fell into a deep sleep in a snowdrift risked never waking up. They could imperceptibly cross the thin line between normal sleep and fatal hypothermia. The Indians practiced a special technique of shallow sleep or dozing that had been perfected over centuries. They would fall into short phases of sleep, literally for 15 to 20 minutes. This was enough to give the brain minimal rest and recharge. Then the body, trained by years of harsh living, gave a sharp signal to wake up. The warrior woke up, assessed his condition, and immediately began to move his fingers. It was necessary to disperse the stagnant blood and make sure that sensitivity was not lost. It resembled a state of deep trance when consciousness does not completely shut down. Part of the brain always remained on guard, monitoring the temperature of the limbs and sounds. If the cold began to insidiously creep under the clothes, this guard woke the person up. In order not to fall asleep too deeply, they often assumed uncomfortable positions. The discomfort prevented the body from completely relaxing and falling into a dangerous oblivion. If the group spent the night together, they worked in pairs, taking turns on duty. One slept while the other monitored his condition and the time. The person on duty ruthlessly shook his comrade if he slept too long or stopped moving. Mutual control was an ironclad guarantee that no one would fall into an eternal sleep. During forced awakenings, they did special isometric exercises. It was necessary to tense the whole body until it shook uncontrollably. Shivering is a natural protective reaction of the body that generates a lot of heat. The Indians knew how to induce it artificially by force of will in order to keep warm. Dreams on such nights were often very vivid, deceptive, and dangerous. They could come in the form of hallucinations of warmth, a burning hearth, or the summer sun. Experienced people knew that a sudden feeling of heat was the most frightening symptom. If a freezing person wanted to undress, it meant that their brain was already dying. Fighting sleep required tremendous willpower, especially on the second day. Fatigue weighed heavily, tempting them to close their eyes, just for a minute. It was in these moments that the true spiritual strength of a warrior was tested. It was not the physically strongest who survived, but the most resilient in spirit. They used rhythmic breathing or mental singing of monotonous ritual songs. This helped to occupy the brain with some kind of work and maintain the rhythm of life. Spiritual practice was inseparable from physical survival in their culture. Prayer or song helped them not to fall into the black pit of oblivion. In the morning, even if you desperately wanted to sleep, you had to get up immediately. Lying down and waiting for the bad weather to end was dangerous because of muscle stiffness. Movement was life in the most literal sense of the word. In the next chapter, you will learn why active movement could kill. One of the main paradoxes of survival in the North was the rule: if you sweat, you die. Many newcomers, feeling cold, began to move frantically, run, or chop branches. This provided a quick warming effect, but then came a cruel and inevitable reckoning. The sweat that soaked through their undergarments cooled instantly as soon as they stopped moving. Wet clothing lost its insulating properties almost completely in a matter of minutes. Water conducts heat 25 times faster than air, literally sucking the life out of you. A wet shirt turned into an icy shell that constricted the chest. Therefore, the Indians moved steadily and smoothly, avoiding intense bursts of movement. They tried to avoid exertion that caused profuse, uncontrollable sweating. If they had to do hard work, such as pulling a horse out of a snowdrift, they would undress. They deliberately took off their heavy outer clothing, remaining in light shirts. It seemed crazy to undress in the cold, but it saved their lives. They worked in the cold lightly dressed, allowing steam to escape from their bodies into the air. Sweat evaporated before it had time to soak into thick furs and leather. Immediately after finishing work, warm, dry clothes were put back on their hot bodies. This method of thermoregulation by undressing required a lot of experience and courage. It was important to catch the right moment to get dressed so as not to get hypothermia. They also took great care to ensure that snow did not get inside their clothes. Snow that got into the sleeves or behind the collar melted from body heat. Melted water created the same moisture problem as sweat. Before entering the shelter, clothes were carefully shaken off with special sticks or a knife. Drying clothes in camping conditions without a large fire was practically impossible. Therefore, preventing them from getting wet was the only reliable way to stay dry. Wet clothes were a one-way ticket for any traveler. If moccasins did get wet, they tried to change them or stuff them with dry grass. This had to be done immediately, without waiting for nightfall and a stop. Moist breath was also a threat if a person wrapped themselves up with their head covered. Condensation settled on the inside of the shelter and turned into frost. Therefore, it was always necessary to leave a small opening for the steam to escape. The Indians used leather that had been specially treated with thick smoke from a fire. Such smoked leather had excellent water-repellent properties and did not stiffen. It absorbed less moisture and dried faster than ordinary rawhide. The techniques for tanning such leather were vital secrets of each tribe. The ability to control one's temperature was the highest skill of survival. It required constant, minute-by-minute self-control and attention to sensations. The balance of dryness was more important than the thickness of the fur or the number of layers. Even a slight sweat on the back could cause severe pneumonia. In a world without antibiotics and hospitals, this meant a slow death. Dryness was synonymous with life, and moisture was synonymous with death. Once the shelter was ready and the clothes were on, the question remained of how to keep the body warm. The Indians instinctively assumed a position that minimized heat loss. This was the classic fetal position, with the knees pulled tightly up to the chin and the back strongly rounded. By curling up into the tightest possible ball, a person reliably covered the most vulnerable areas of their body. The abdomen and groin, which lose internal energy the fastest, were protected first. Large femoral arteries run through the groin area, located alarmingly close to the surface of the skin. If these areas are not covered, the blood in them begins to cool rapidly under the influence of the frosty air. The cooled blood is instantly carried by the heart throughout the body, causing general hypothermia. This works on the principle of a powerful cooling radiator, which had to be blocked at all costs. By curling up, a person created a closed thermal circuit and began to effectively warm themselves with their thighs. In such situations, the hands were never left idle. They were hidden deep in the armpits. The palms were also often placed in the warm groin area, which is considered the hottest spot on the body. The temperature there remains high even when the skin on other parts of the body is already beginning to freeze. This simple action allowed them to keep their fingers warm and maintain their mobility without using fire. No experienced hunter left their hands lying along their body or under their head. If a group of warriors found themselves traveling together, they used the collective heat of their bodies. In such cases, people lay close to each other, forming a so-called wolf's ball. It was a powerful living core capable of withstanding the most severe Siberian or Canadian frost. The bodies of the sleeping people warmed their neighbors, creating a common microclimate inside the improvised circle. Such unity allowed them to survive even where a single person would inevitably have died by morning. Inside this dense human ring, a strict hierarchy of survival was always observed. The most vulnerable members of the group were always placed in the very center of the circle. The youngest warriors, as well as those who were wounded or severely weakened by the journey, lay there. The temperature in the center of the huddle was always a few degrees higher than outside. This was the tribe's direct concern for its future and for those who needed help. Only the most enduring, strong, and experienced fighters lay at the edges of the living ring. They were the ones who took the first blow of the icy wind and the night cold. However, no one stayed at the edge until dawn, as it was too dangerous. Periodically, the warriors at the edge would switch places with those who were currently in the warm center. This rotation took place constantly throughout the night and was considered completely natural. Fairness and mutual assistance in such situations were not just words, but the only guarantee of life. Any manifestation of selfishness in the harsh conditions of winter was considered unthinkable and destructive for everyone. If someone refused to switch places, it could cost his comrade his life. The Indians understood that only by acting as a single organism could they wait for the sun. Each warrior felt responsible not only for himself, but also for his neighbor's breath. At the same time, it was important to exercise caution so as not to harm one's health. It was impossible to squeeze the limbs too tightly, as this led to a dangerous disruption of blood flow. If the blood stopped circulating properly, the arms or legs would quickly become numb. Loss of sensation was the first and most serious warning sign of danger. To avoid this, the warriors periodically made smooth movements with their fingers inside their shoes. These microscopic movements help maintain normal blood circulation in the limbs. Even in a deep sleep, a person could control the state of their body. If the cold began to take over, it was necessary to immediately change position or stretch a little. An experienced hunter felt the line between safe sleep and the onset of dangerous freezing. The ability to hear the signals of one's own body was honed through years of training and hiking. Even if a person found themselves completely alone, they could use their belongings for additional warmth. Heavy backpacks, saddles, and leather bags were neatly arranged in a tight circle around the body. These items were used to construct a kind of protective nest which served as an additional barrier. Such a wall perfectly protected the back from cold drafts, which always blow at ground level. In this context, the survival posture became not just a way to rest, but a conscious action. Every little detail in the arrangement of equipment could play a decisive role in saving a life. Bags not only blocked the wind, but also served as an additional layer of insulation from the frozen ground. Fir branches or dry grass were often placed underneath if they could be found. People literally dug into the ground, creating their own little world of warmth in the middle of the icy desert. This required discipline and a clear understanding of how the environment worked. The fetal position itself reminded the warriors of a return to their roots and their original state of peace. It was the safest position in which every human being finds themselves before birth. Nature itself suggested this ideal form to people, which is best suited for preserving the spark of life. The Indians simply followed these wise laws of natural survival, proven over thousands of years. Every second in this position was a struggle for the next breath and a new day. All the knowledge of their ancestors boiled down to one simple goal: to preserve the inner flame at any cost. Every calorie of heat that was saved thanks to the correct posture slowly but surely brought dawn closer. When the first rays of the sun touched the earth, the warriors rose full of strength to continue their journey. History has preserved these techniques as an example of incredible resilience and a deep understanding of human physiology. The ability to freeze correctly, strange as it may seem, was the main skill for survival. When the storm finally subsided, the most critical and truly dangerous moment for each warrior arrived. Emerging from a prolonged state of forced hibernation was a difficult and painful ordeal for a severely depleted body. After long hours of immobility, the body felt foreign. The muscles were terribly stiff and responded with sharp pain at every attempt to move. Standing up abruptly in such a situation could easily cause severe dizziness or even sudden loss of consciousness. The blood that had stagnated in the limbs did not reach the brain in time, leading to dangerous falls directly onto the ice. The Indians always began their morning with a very slow and thorough check of the sensitivity of all their limbs. Without getting up from their place and remaining in the warmth of their shelter, they began to move their fingers almost imperceptibly. This was a vital check that helped them understand whether there was still a spark of life in their bodies. It was necessary to make sure that the fingers and toes not only moved, but also clearly felt a slight pain. If alarming numbness was detected in any area, that area was rubbed very carefully and for a long time with a soft woolen cloth. There was an important rule that was passed down from father to son for many generations. Rubbing frozen skin with snow was strictly forbidden, although nowadays this is often presented as useful advice. In fact, the sharp ice crystals that make up snow would instantly injure fragile skin. Such microscopic cuts would become open gateways for any dangerous infection in the field. The process of warming the affected areas of the body had to be as gradual and gentle as possible. The very first movements in the open air were always stiff and very clumsy. From the outside, such a person might seem like a frail old man who finds it difficult to take even a single short step. However, as the body gradually warmed up, the blood began to flow faster and faster through the veins. A thorough inspection of personal equipment was always the next mandatory step in this strict morning ritual. It was necessary to carefully shake out all the snow that had accumulated in every fold of clothing and in all travel bags. If the snow was left inside, it would eventually melt from the body heat and turn the clothes into an icy shell. Hunters carefully checked the leather straps and fastenings of their skis or snowshoes. They looked for the slightest cracks or scuffs that could appear under the influence of extreme cold. Any breakage, even the smallest, of important equipment far from home still threatened a person with imminent death. In deep snowdrifts, a broken snowshoe turned a warrior into easy prey for predators or starvation. Therefore, no less time was devoted to repairing things than to physical training. If a malfunction was discovered, they tried to fix it immediately using spare wires or pieces of leather. Responsibility for one's property was part of the general culture of survival in the harsh northern latitudes. If a group of warriors was scattered by a sudden storm, an active search and roll call began immediately after the calm. People understood that some of their comrades could be blocked in the snow or simply lose their bearings. They often used skillful imitations of the cries of forest crows or the long howls of wolves to communicate. These sounds were familiar to the forest and did not arouse suspicion among casual witnesses. This trick allowed them to find each other quickly without attracting the attention of hostile tribes. Warm food provided not only physical energy, but also a powerful psychological incentive to keep going. After a sip of hot water, the world no longer seemed so hostile and deadly dangerous. The warriors shared their last reserves of pemmican to support those who had suffered more than others from the cold. Saving food that morning was out of the question, as the body needed fuel to keep warm. Proper nutrition after hypothermia was the basis of ancient medicine, practiced by forest dwellers who knew the body's resources well. Assessing the surrounding terrain after heavy snowfall was always an incredibly difficult navigational task. The landscape changed beyond recognition overnight, and familiar landmarks simply disappeared. Huge boulders and fallen trees were buried under meters of white snow. In such conditions, one had to rely entirely on the current position of the sun and the direction of the prevailing winds. Intuition and memory helped to find the right direction, even in complete emptiness. The experience of navigating in this endless, white silence was considered the highest and most respected art of a tracker. Senior warriors read the snow-covered ground like an open book, noticing barely visible hints of relief. They knew which way the tree branches leaned under the weight of the snow and how this related to the cardinal points. Without this deep knowledge, any group was doomed to wander endlessly in circles. The ability to navigate in a changed world was the only chance for a successful completion of the journey. The morning after a blizzard was always perceived by the Indians as a true rebirth. Their deep gratitude to the harsh nature and spirits for sparing their lives was completely sincere. The survivor emerged from his snow shelter not as a proud conqueror of nature, but as its wise son. This clear, frosty morning gave great hope for a speedy return to their native home and the warmth of the family hearth. Each such rescue strengthened the spirit and made a person part of the great cycle of life in the wild. The experience of the indigenous peoples of North America teaches us one truly important lesson. True survival is always deep adaptation. For centuries, European civilization has built the thickest walls possible to reliably isolate itself from unpredictable wilderness. We have become accustomed to creating complex artificial comforts around ourselves, trying to completely isolate our lives from the influence of the external environment. The Indians, on the contrary, originally built their daily lives so that they were ready for any sudden changes at any moment. For them, the surrounding world was not an enemy from which they needed to hide behind stone barriers. Their entire material culture, including clothing, portable dwellings, and food preparation methods, was geared toward exceptional mobility. Even the social structure of the tribe was subject to the need to move quickly and adapt to seasonal climate changes. They never depended on external sources of heat, water pipes, or complex mechanical devices. Their main and most advanced technology was their unique knowledge and honed skills, which could not be broken or lost. This invaluable knowledge was harmoniously integrated into their culture, ancient myths, and familiar daily rituals. For the inhabitants of the forests and steppes, a severe blizzard was not a natural disaster at all, but simply one of the familiar states of the surrounding world. They perceived this phenomenon as naturally and normally as a bright sunny day or a warm summer rain. They knew how to find a special harsh beauty and hidden power, even in the most violent and deadly snowstorm. In their hearts, the paralyzing fear of the unknown was always replaced by deep respect for the elements and extreme caution. Every action during a storm was dictated by centuries-old wisdom, not panic. The story of human survival in an icy blizzard is, above all, a majestic story about the power of the human spirit. It tells of the ability of an individual to endure almost any trial without breaking down or losing face. It is an important reminder that we are forever part of nature, not its rightful masters. We must recognize that the world around us is much stronger than any human conceit. Only by accepting this fact with due humility can we seriously hope for the long-term survival of our species. Imagine for a moment that you are standing in the place of that lonely traveler in the endless and frosty winter steppe. There is nothing around you but endless snow, whistling wind, and bone-chilling cold. However, despite the circumstances, you remain completely calm and fully confident in your abilities. You know exactly what to do in the next minute and are absolutely sure that you will live to see the first dawn. This state is true freedom, which only true knowledge can give a person. Ancient hunters did not seek comfort. They sought harmony with their surroundings at any given moment. If the ground became cold, they learned to warm it with their breath in the correct body position. If the sky was covered with clouds, they found their way by the direction of the freezing branches in the whisper of the wind. For them, there was no such thing as bad weather, only the degree of a person's readiness to meet the challenge. This philosophical approach allowed them not just to exist, but to thrive in the harshest corners of the planet. For them, every snowflake was part of a grand design, not a threat. Today, we think we have conquered the cold with electricity and central heating, but this victory is illusory until we learn to control our inner fire and our thoughts. When the lights of the cities go out, man is once again alone with the primordial darkness. And at that moment, the magic of modern gadgets disappears, giving way to simple and harsh reality. then the very techniques that saved people long before the first written word came to the rescue. True power is hidden not in devices, but in our ability to remain human in all circumstances. Ultimately, all these stories of survival serve as a mirror that reflects our true nature. In them, we see a reflection of our will to live and our ability to find a way out where others see a dead end. Let the experience of ancient tribes become not just an interesting fact from the past, but a living source of inspiration for you. Every time you face difficulties, remember those who slept in the snow and greeted the dawn with a smile. You carry within you the same spark of life that burned in the hearts of the great warriors of the past. Trust your feelings, remember the lessons of history, and never let the cold settle in your soul. We have examined in as much detail and step-by-step as possible how the unique knowledge of our ancestors allowed people to survive in sometimes completely impossible conditions. It is important to understand that there was no magic or supernatural powers in these ancient methods. Although from the outside, it might have seemed like a miracle. In fact, everything we have seen is pure physics and a deep knowledge of biology, which were skillfully combined into a single working system. Every action of the Native Americans was based on the laws of thermodynamics and an understanding of how the human body distributes its internal resources. Would you like to see an analysis of other, more specific and rare survival techniques used by Native Americans in different climatic zones? Be sure to write your ideas and specific suggestions for topics for future episodes right here in the comments. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click on the bell so you don't miss our new historical investigations.